Hello, everybody, and good evening. My name is Don Arleth, and you're watching World News Tonight, live from Warsaw. U.S., Ukrainian, and Russian delegations are meeting in Abu Dhabi for the first round of trilateral talks since the full-scale invasion. The question of the Donbas is key, says Volodymyr Zelenskyy, as both Russia and Ukraine are unlikely to make concessions on control over the region. We'll have more on that in just a moment, but first, the latest headlines.
Anything of them, they'll say they sent some troops to Afghanistan or this or that. And they did. They stayed a little back, a little off the front lines.
Trump's comments on NATO's role in Afghanistan sparked backlash from European capitals.
I am in contact with Mayor Klitschko and with other Ukrainian mayors. If help is needed, we try to provide it.
Warsaw sends generators to Kyiv as the mayor repeats his call for residents to leave the freezing city. And Poland's industrial production up by 7% year-on-year in December, exceeding expectations twofold. Ukraine-Russia talks brokered by the United States have kicked off in the United Arab Emirates. Ukraine is under mounting U.S. pressure to reach a peace deal to end the war, with Moscow demanding Kyiv cede the entirety of the Donbas. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy says the territorial dispute will be the top priority of the latest talks. Now, our correspondent Oz Chatterjee is alive from Kyiv, and he's following this story. Good evening, Oz. So what do we know about these latest talks?
Well, President Zelenskyy called them important in his nightly statement, but also said it was too early to draw conclusions from them. Clearly, Ukraine is in a difficult position here, under pressure by the United States to come to some sort of agreement. Zelenskyy himself saying that the issue of the Donbas, that's Luhansk and Donetsk regions of Ukraine, was key. That was also something reiterated by Yuri Ushakov, the Kremlin aide, following those talks that the U.S. delegation had in Moscow, who said that Russia basically do not get your hopes up of any kind of long-term agreement if the issue of Donetsk and Luhansk isn't agreed upon. And by Russia, agreed upon in Russia's terms means that Ukraine withdraws from that in its entirety. Zelenskyy, in his nightly address, saying Ukraine's position is clear. Ukraine has said over many occasions that it's not willing to withdraw from that territory. So while these talks are ongoing and Zelenskyy is striking a positive tone about them taking place, the fundamental issue of territory is one that is yet to be resolved, and it's unclear if there is going to be any kind of movement towards it. For Ukraine to give up those territories, as Russia's demanding, Zelenskyy says he would need to put that to a referendum to his people, and that's something that can only be achieved by having a ceasefire, otherwise it would be impossible to hold a plebiscite like that in the country. So huge unresolved issues to come through these talks, and it remains to be seen whether we're going to have any kind of resolution coming from tomorrow, the next day's talks in Saturday. And yeah, as you can see around me, the street lights have gone off here in central Kyiv, and it is snowing, so the temperatures are still well below zero. The energy crisis is carrying on, no matter what's going on in Abu Dhabi at the moment. Mikhail von Blumstein has more on the story.
These are hardly ideal conditions for construction work. But as Ukraine's energy infrastructure gets battered every night, these repairmen are in a race against time to get this power station going again.
The weather conditions are against us now. It is very cold, but we are not stopping. We are working to restore as much equipment as possible after the attacks, as soon as possible.
Since October, Ukraine reportedly lost 8.5 gigawatts. The power deficit currently stands at an estimated 7 gigawatts. The damage is extensive. The lack of air defense systems seriously hamper repair works, which would normally only take weeks. It also makes it difficult to estimate the total cost of the repairs.
To restore the system before the heating season of 2025-2026, there was estimate that in that time $1 billion needed to repair some critical energy facilities.
Meanwhile, Ukrainians are dealing with the fallout of the blackouts. Special shelters are set up to protect people from freezing temperatures. The Kyiv Zoo has resorted to wood stoves to keep animals warm. And schools have shut down, unable to provide heating in classrooms. Where possible, they resort to online teaching. Kyiv Mayor Vitaly Klitschko has renewed his calls for civilians to leave the city.
The most difficult moment may be yet to come. Make sure you have supplies of food, water, and essential medicines. Those of you who still have the option to leave the city for areas with alternative sources of electricity and heating should consider doing so.
But some help is on the way. Roughly 400 generators have been pledged by the Polish government, while the city of Warsaw will send 90.
These are various types of generators, including industrial ones that are able to provide energy for hospitals, as well as smaller ones. These are exactly the demands that Kyiv Mayor Klitschko has identified.
The European Commission has announced it will send another 450 generators. A Polish civilian charity is well on the way to raise around 2.5 million euros to purchase more. Despite a farmer protest at the Polish-Ukrainian border, the first batch of generators was delivered to Ukraine on Friday. For TVP World, Michiel van Blommestein.
The World Economic Forum has drawn to a close in Davos, but debates sparked during the event are only just beginning. Across Europe, leaders are sounding increasingly concerned, warning that the international order they've relied on for decades may be a thing of the past. Kazimierz Wysiak reports.
As this year's World Economic Forum here in Davos, Switzerland is coming to an end, what we've seen here in this past week, packed with political discussions, is a clear emergence of two contrasting visions of what these leaders who gathered here call the New World Order. First, we have Europe and Canada expressing outrage over Donald Trump's approach to Greenland and overall his approach to allies, very much chipping away at the trust towards the United States as a reliable partner.
Let me be direct. We are in the midst of a rupture, not a transition. Over the past 2 decades, a series of crises in finance, health, energy, and geopolitics have laid bare the risks of extreme global integration.
The international order of the past 3 decades, anchored in international law, has always been imperfect. Today, its very foundations have been shaken.
So we have Europe signaling for more pragmatism in relations with the United States and for reforms to make the continent more independent. But there is also another vision, the vision of US President Donald Trump, who came here not only to talk about Greenland and Ukraine, but also to sign into existence his new international organization, the Board of Peace. And while he is hailing it as a major success for world order, there is also plenty of big questions hanging in the air. First of all, there is the question of the potential overlap with the United Nations, but also of who exactly Donald Trump is inviting to this organization.
The Board of Peace really should not proceed. The Security Council of the UN gave a limited mandate to a Board of Peace to work on the Gaza issues. But what's now happened is that President Trump has expanded that to invite leaders from around the world of all kinds to join him on what looks like an alternative to both the Security Council and the United Nations. And one of the most bizarre twists in it is that if you pay $1 billion, you get to be a permanent member of the Board of Peace. This is not a legitimate way to run international affairs.
And then there is also the question of who Donald Trump is inviting to join this organization. For example, he's invited Russian President Vladimir Putin and Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko, both of whom are responsible for the ongoing war in Ukraine and deaths of thousands of people. Also, on Friday, the US president revoked his invitation to Canada to join his Board of Peace after the critical comments made by Mark Carney. So it does seem like Donald Trump is inviting those who are currently in his favor and who could be his potential clients.
Everybody wants to be a part of it, and we'll work with many others, including the United Nations. We are truly honored by your presence today, leaders of countries, in most cases very popular leaders, some cases not so popular.
According to Trump, more than 50 countries from across the world have been invited to join his organization, and some have already outright refused, like France, Denmark, Norway, Slovenia or now Spain, citing concerns I've mentioned before. Some other states are still on the fence as they need to navigate their unity inside Europe and relations with the United States. What will happen now is plenty of discussions inside these countries on what should be the next steps. So this World Economic Forum has answered some questions, but left us with plenty new ones. From Davos for TVP World, Kazimierz Łyszak.
More comments from Helen Clark, former Prime Minister of New Zealand, and TVP World's Between the Lines coming up right after World News tonight at 8:30 p.m., so stay with us. You're looking at the most prestigious board of leaders ever assembled, boasts its founding father, Donald Trump, a body, he says, could soon do, quote, pretty much whatever we want. But as the Board of Peace moves beyond Gaza and into the global stage, Europe's lukewarm response is exposing deep doubts about who would really hold the power. So where is Poland in all of this? Paweł Trzaskowski explains.
You are looking at the most prestigious board of leaders ever assembled, to quote its founding father, Donald Trump. The Board of Peace, initially conceived as an organization overseeing the ceasefire in Gaza, has ambitious plans to expand.
Once this board is completely formed, we can do pretty much whatever we want to do.
Among the European countries, Hungary signs on, along with Bulgaria, Kosovo, and that's it. Trump's invitation gets a cold response from Europe.
It's highly, highly risky, in particular for such countries as Poland.
The risks are numerous, but one seems to tower above them all.
What's the point of having a board peace if the text gives all the decision-making to President Trump?
And Poland has been hesitant from day one. President Karol Nawrocki expressed interest, but hedged his answer, explaining that the decision wasn't just his to make.
This type of presidential signature, of course, requires prior approval by the Polish parliament and an initiative from the government. So I simply expressed my great interest in participating in the Board of Peace.
The government says they will have to mull it over.
We will take it very seriously and examine all the pros and cons.
For Warsaw, the situation isn't entirely inconvenient. It looks as if the decision is being delayed by domestic politics.
Mr. Nawrocki's been able to maintain a positive relationship with Mr. Trump. Mr. Trump doesn't seem to bear him a grudge. But the Polish government has actually got what it's wanted, which is for Mr. Nawrocki not to join this body.
Thank you very much.
But stalling is unlikely to work as a long-term strategy, given Poland's dependency on the US on many fronts.
As a Polish Prime Minister, I will be always very, dedicated to transatlantic relations, and for us, the United States are absolutely the most important partner when it comes to our security.
And ultimately, decision day may eventually come. Paweł Trzaskowski for TVP World.
Congratulations, President Trump.
Donald Trump has once again sparked backlash from European capitals as he played down the role of America's allies in the U.S.-led operation in Afghanistan. They stayed a little back, a little off the front lines, Trump said on Fox News. The UK Prime Minister hit back, saying the comment was insulting. Diana Skaya reports.
It's having to do with war and peace.
From NATO doubts in Davos to Greenland demands and a sharp exchange at the White House, U.S. President Donald Trump questioned NATO's loyalty, even as Alliance Chief Mark Rutte insisted Europe would defend the United States if it were attacked.
I don't know that they'd be there for us.
Trump doubled down on his criticism in an interview a day later, telling Fox Business Network's Mornings with Maria that the United States had never needed NATO and questioned his allies' involvement in the U.S.-led mission to Afghanistan.
They'll say they sent some troops to Afghanistan or this or that, and they did. They stayed a little back, a little off the front lines.
Just a day earlier, Mark Rutte directly addressed the president's doubts, citing NATO's response after September 11.
You are not absolutely sure that the Europeans would come to the rescue of the US if you will be attacked. Let me tell you, they will. And they did in Afghanistan, as you know, for every American who paid the ultimate, for every 2 Americans who paid the ultimate price, there was 1 soldier from another NATO country who did not come back to his family. From the Netherlands, from Denmark, particularly from other countries. So you can be assured, absolutely, if ever the US will be under attack, your allies will be with you.
Analysts say the idea that NATO has benefited at America's expense ignore the human cost paid by U.S. allies.
The idea that, as you mentioned, that NATO just simply has been free riding off of the United States when the only time that Article 5 was invoked was after 9/11, and the U.S. asked for NATO's help. And then that really offensive fact that NATO members, including Denmark, which suffered the 3rd largest losses per capita, and Poland, they sacrificed in Iraq and in Afghanistan.
And numbers don't lie. By the end of 2014, NATO losses in Afghanistan totaled 3,485 deaths. And even though the United States accounted for nearly 68% of those killed, its allies also paid a significant price. The UK, Canada, and France made up another 20%. Smaller countries suffered some of the heaviest losses per capita. Denmark lost 43 troops. Poland lost 40. The figures reinforce Mark Rutte's point. When the U.S. called on NATO after 9/11, its allies answered. Trump's comments on Fox News have been met with a strong backlash from European allies, with British Prime Minister Keir Starmer calling them insulting and frankly appalling. For TVP World, I'm Diana Skaya.
The 457.
Poland's economy is back in the driver's seat with the pedal to the metal. Manufacturing is roaring back faster than anyone expected. A surprise surge in industrial output is driving growth, boosting confidence at home and putting the country firmly on investors' radar. Maciej Wilowski brings us the latest.
The Polish economy is picking up speed, and a rebound in manufacturing is adding to that momentum. Industrial production rose more than 7% in December compared to a year earlier, more than double expectations of a roughly 3% gain. This prompted an enthusiastic response from Poland's Prime Minister Donald Tusk.
That's what I call growth. As I predicted, 2026 will be a year of acceleration.
Poland's industrial sector, which accounts for just under a third of the country's economic output, has caught the attention of international investors.
You have a cost position that makes it attractive for international strategic investors in manufacturing, automotive, etc.
Disruptions to global trade and geopolitical uncertainty have not curbed this appetite.
Poland is a growth leader in Europe. So we are seeing huge interest of investors of other countries as well.
Combined with robust consumer spending and public and private investment, manufacturing gains could further fuel Poland's economy, which is expected to grow close to 4% this year. But the sector isn't without challenges. Car manufacturing, a key pillar of Polish industry, has been undercut by a surge in Chinese car imports, electrification, and weakness in the German economy.
Historically, the economies have been quite linked with Germany as part of Germany's supply chain for automotive and manufacturing.
As of 2024, Poland's auto industry employed just under 200,000 people. And Poland's cost advantage relative to Western Europe is steadily shrinking, with labor costs having doubled between 2016 and 2024, according to Statistics Poland. By comparison, they rose just 30% in the EU as a whole. While hurdles remain, renewed industrial strength could give Poland's economic expansion another leg to stand on. Maciej Wilowski for TVP World.
3 Club Brugge fans took dressing for the occasion a little too literally, showing up at Kazakhstan's Astana Arena in the notorious Borat mankini. Their skimpy outfits didn't exactly win points with the local authorities, who promptly handed the trio 5 days in jail for public drunkenness and minor hooliganism.
Making the glorious nation of Kazakhstan famous again? Well, these 3 Club Brugge fans were in for a bitter surprise. They were arrested at the Astana Arena Stadium in Kazakhstan after appearing in the stands wearing the neon green mankini made famous by the 2006 film Borat. Police said the costumes showed disrespect and disturbed public order. The 3 Belgian nationals were sentenced to 5 days in jail for public drunkenness and minor hooliganism.
Please, you look.
Now, who doesn't remember the Borat character? Created by director and lead star comedian Sacha Baron Cohen, it's long been a sensitive subject in Kazakhstan. The film angered authorities who once banned it outright, accusing it of insulting the country's image. Kazakhstan later tried to reclaim the joke, even using Borat's catchphrase "very nice" in a 2020 tourism campaign.
That's very nice.
Yet football stadiums apparently remain no laughing matter. This isn't the first time Borat caused trouble at matches in Kazakhstan. In 2024, security confiscated a Borat-themed flag from a Chelsea supporter during a game against FC Astana. For now, Belgium's foreign ministry says it's monitoring the situation and providing consular assistance. As for the fans, the joke, well, it seems, was not so very nice. For TVP World, I'm Diana Skaya.
And now back to our main topic today, the Ukraine peace talks underway in Abu Dhabi. This is the first trilateral between Russia, Ukraine, and the United States since the full-scale invasion. Joining me now to discuss is David Debato, geopolitical analyst and former U.S. Army counterintelligence officer. Hello, David, and thank you so much for joining us on World News Tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Yes. Now, this just came in just a minute ago. As for the substance of the negotiations, still too early to draw conclusions today. We will see how the discussions proceed tomorrow and what results they bring. That's what, according to President Zelenskyy. So I'm going to back up a little bit. Ukraine did not get a signature on security guarantees or the $800 billion prosperity package in Davos. Why do you think that is?
There's a conflict going on right now between the Trump administration, meaning Trump himself, the White House, the Pentagon, and the U.S. Congress. As an example, the U.S. Congress, both the lower house of representatives and the Senate, just passed or almost passed the latest defense budget, which is a big deal. It's almost $1 trillion. However, the Congress had to fight with the White House to keep in a provision which would give, I believe it was $600 or $800 million to Ukraine that the White House and the Pentagon wanted pulled out of the latest budget. That's just an example of the tug of war going on between the executive branch, the administration, and the U.S. Congress. There's really some conflict there. And right now, as of today, it seems that the Congress is winning, at least temporarily, on support and aid to Ukraine.
Right. We heard that this might be signed soon. Do you think that still may be the case?
If I had to guess, which I hate to do, I would say no. Look, the U.S., meaning under the Trump administration, has been very, very hesitant to sign any concrete security guarantees for Ukraine. That's a tragedy, and it's one of the main holdups that has been going on for the last several months. Ukraine hopefully does not settle for anything but ironclad signed security guarantees by the West. Although, based on what's been said recently over the last several days and weeks by the American administration, even a guarantee, even a signed guarantee, doesn't seem to be enough of an ironclad commitment to back up any ally, whether it's Ukraine or NATO. So whether that is a guarantee that they're going to sign, that the negotiations are going to bear fruit right now, like everything else in the Trump administration, I just really don't know as of right now.
Well, do you think that the security guarantees may be contingent on the Donbas being resolved between Ukraine and Russia?
Well, absolutely. I mean, two of the main things, for at least for Ukraine, is the ceding, the giving up of territory. which is against their constitution, and ironclad security guarantees, which they've allegedly been given in the past, such as the Budapest Agreement, which obviously didn't mean anything, even though it was signed by the various nations, including Russia. So yes, whatever happens with the Donbas, whatever happens on the ground in Donbas, meaning the military situation, is crucially important. And look, I want to tell your listeners right now, despite what is usually portrayed in a lot of the Western press, the Russian army is not doing well. They are not succeeding in defeating the Ukrainian military, and they're doing it with the Ukrainians having the bare minimum of ammunition, weapons, drones, artillery, and so forth. So no, the Ukrainians don't want to give up anything, and they don't want to stop the fight, and certainly don't want to sign away territory that Russia still doesn't even control.
There's also speculation that in the UAE, this is the main issue. We've heard some estimates say that 90% of everything is pretty much agreed upon. It's just that issue of the Donbas. Do you think that that's really true, or do you think there are some other sticking points that's not maybe being discussed publicly?
No, I think that's probably the primary reason. Like I said, this is in the Ukrainian constitution. They don't want, nor should they, give up any land at all, and certainly no territory that the Russians don't even control. That's the primary reason. But as I said, also security guarantees, as well as financial, but security being the primary one. If they can't get guarantees that they don't have to give up territory in the Donbas or anywhere else in eastern Ukraine that Russia doesn't even control, and that they're going to get at least allegedly security guarantees that they agree upon, whether that's boots on the ground, advisors, equipment, weapons, and so forth, they're probably not going to sign. And to answer your question, would this Donbas, the territorial issues, be a showstopper? It could be, yes.
Okay, so in your opinion, since the security guarantees haven't been resolved, then the talks basically in the UAE are doomed to failure.
Well, look at it. None of the talks so far have panned out. I've said it many, many times before that Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff are not the best negotiators to have there. If anything, they side with Russia, with the Kremlin. To have the Americans, the American negotiating team, actually be siding with Russia in negotiations with Ukraine is absurd. Not to mention, they don't have a military background or an intelligence background. They're both real estate folks. So that's how they look at things, just as Donald Trump does, from a transactional basis. What are they going to get out of it? In this case, of course, what is America going to get out of it? So again, to try to answer your question, if I had to guess, I would say there's a very good chance that these negotiations are in fact doomed to failure. And this is going to go on and on for an unknown amount of time in the next few months.
Do you think the UAE is the proper venue for these discussions? We've heard the Turkish president say that Turkey could participate and facilitate such discussions. We know the relationships that Turkey has with both Ukraine and Russia. Would that make the U.S. role a little bit more less significant, and therefore that's not being considered? What are your thoughts on that?
I don't know if it's not being considered, but you're hinting that, in fact, the Americans wanted this to be in the UAE. They do. They are courting the Gulf states very, very hard right now. Look, Qatar is giving Donald Trump a new Air Force One. I think it's I don't know. It's expensive. Many, many hundreds of billions of dollars they're giving him. The UAE is becoming very friendly to the Trump administration. So it's in their interest, meaning the Americans' interest, to have these negotiations in a very friendly, in quotes, neutral territory. Whereas, as you said, Ukraine is much closer, both physically and diplomatically, to Turkey, which has offered many, many times to host negotiations. I think it's kind of crazy that they don't, but I believe that the Americans are probably strong-arming the Ukrainians to have this in a Gulf state, in this case, the UAE. Again, I don't think we're going to see a resolution in these negotiations, and that this is going to have to be revisited again in the next weeks and months to come.
Well, we both hate to speculate, but David D'Abato, I thank you for that discussion and spot-on geopolitical analysis. Thank you, sir.
You bet.
And that concludes this edition of World News Tonight. Thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you next time. Good night.